by me. Yeah. Okay, I guess I gotta.
You can feel free to continue from here, Ray.
I was trying to, my cursor disappears, and so I was trying to find a way to get on there. Oh, there we go. Okay. So the MUTCD is published regularly. Well, not regularly. It's actually been a long time since there was the last update, but it's put out by the Federal Highway Administration. And the latest edition just came out last December. So it includes a lot of major changes. There was a lot of stuff that was overdue. People have been looking to have into the MUTCD. And so everybody's very excited as far as on the traffic engineering side to get this new information out there. And the purpose of the MUTCD is to set uniform national criteria for traffic control devices. And so this is the whole intent is so that when you travel across the United States, when you're going to see the same signs everywhere, they're going to mean the same thing. You can just be consistent as far as what you're expected to do regard to that. But it's not just streets and highways. It also covers pedestrian, bicycle facilities, and actually site roadways. So parking lots that are open to public travel have to comply with the MUTCD officially. So what are traffic control devices? Traditionally thought of as signs, signals, and markings. Those things which we use to tell drivers and travelers regulatory warning or guidance messages as far as how they need to proceed. And so there's some thoughts there as far as information from the manual as far as what traffic control devices should be doing. One of the concerns that traffic engineers have is not putting out too many traffic control devices just because it gets to be overload as far as drivers. We really want drivers to be paying attention to not crashing into things, crashing into bicyclists. And so the more devices we put out there, we think that detracts from that. So we do try to keep devices to a minimum and make sure that they are clear and command respect. There are a lot of other things on the roadway that are not TCDs, which are certainly interested in, like channelizing islands, speed humps, rumble strips, and lighting. So the MUTCD does not cover those. By and large, the MUTCD does not require the use of a particular traffic control device. It just talks about if you're going to put in a traffic control device, this is how it should be used. But the implementation decision should be made by an engineer considering that the safety and the operations for all users. Another item there is that a traffic control device that doesn't meet the requirements of the MUTCD cannot be used without an approval to experiment. There is a process. It is not an agile process. It is not an easy process, but agencies can request approval to experiment, and there is a way of going about that so they can try new things. And then obviously once the MUTCD comes out and gets updated, it takes a while for all of those devices which may no longer be in compliance to get updated. So it's up to the agency, whether that be the state, the county, the city, to set up a program. Typically it's on the maintenance side, just to go out and when they are refreshing their traffic control devices to bring them up to standard. Traffic control devices in the MUTCD have to be in the public domain because the federal government doesn't want to be putting out a requirement that everybody go out and buy a device from a particular vendor and put them into a proprietary situation there. So that's where that comes up. And then this is the federal MUTCD, but within a state, actually, each state adopts either the MUTCD on their own or a supplement to the MUTCD, which they might make some changes. So Virginia does have a supplement to the federal MUTCD. They've got 2 years from the time that the federal manual was was issued in order to update that. So that'd be December 2025. So let me just pause here real quick to see if there are any questions about the purpose and scope of the MUTCD.
Yeah, Ray, just let me chime in. Questions are welcome here. And while Ray's doing his talk, he said he would take questions on each of the slides. We'll try to get through them quickly, but if you do have questions, you could either raise your hand or put the question in the chat, and Alexis and I will try to get to it. But go ahead if there's any questions. Now's a good time in general.
Yeah, the rest of it's going to be dealing more with specific devices. So I think you're going to be more interested in that.
All right.
If not, we'll move on.
Mary has a question about asking if the signs are expected to conform to the American Disabilities Act.
The Americans with Disabilities Act, yes, that is certainly required. So everything, as far as on the pedestrian side, has to comply with ADA. And that is a civil right. That's not to be questioned. I mean, agencies just have to do it. One of the big things that's taken several years is to go and implement curb ramps. So that's been a real resource problem for a lot of agencies. But at this point, I'd say hopefully we're pretty well along as far as getting all sidewalks having curb ramps at all intersections. But ADA is required.
I think that's it.
So the MUTCD is, like I said, 1,100 pages. And so here's the general organization. So the general section there, part 1, I covered a lot of those issues in the preceding slides. The next 3 parts, signs, signals, and markings, are dealing with the specific traffic control devices. And as you can see, that takes up a lot of space in the manual. And then the next 5 parts are really dealing more with the context as far as how, what situation you're in, how would you specifically apply those sign signals and markings for that particular area. So part 9 is a new part, but it's dealing specifically with bicycle facilities. And bicycle facilities here is very broad. So even a shared roadway is a bicycle facility. So if you did want to look at the MUTCD, I would say that would be the place that would be most profitable for you to look at. That and also the general is good, part 1. So, shared roadways. So the manual does point out that motor vehicles and vulnerable road users are both likely to be present when the land use suggests that trips could be served by varied modes. So any place you have some origins destinations where people are likely to walk or to take bicycles, the engineers and the agency should be aware, and they should be making the facilities ready for that. So the next second part there is some thoughts as far as things that the agency, the engineer should be looking at as far as how to do that design, how to implement it. And then in chapter 9, or in part 9, actually it does talk about the fact that bicycles are typically defined as vehicles, which I know you all understand, have the same rights and responsibilities as a driver, but that also bicycles are vulnerable road users. And so that needs to be taken into account as well.
Does the manual use that phrase, vulnerable road users?
It does.
Okay, thank you.
So one of the big changes as far as in this manual is dealing with speed limits. If you are aware of the MUTCD, had any knowledge of it, you're probably familiar with the 85th percentile speed and how critical that was in terms of setting speed limits. With the new manual, it actually specifically says that on urban, suburban arterials and rural arterials that are going through a small town, the 85th percentile is not as important as it has been in the past. And so the agency, the engineer should be looking at ways, at alternatives, or taking more things into account than just the 85th percentile speed in terms of looking at what the speed limit should be, and also should be looking at speed reduction countermeasures, because one of the things that as a traffic engineer, just setting a speed limit really doesn't do very much to change how drivers proceed. So we really need to do something more to get them to travel at a reasonable speed, or the speed that we would like for them to be. And certainly as bicyclists, the speed we would be more comfortable with them at.
Ray, does this apply to VDOT, or do they have to adopt it formally in the next couple of years? Because we would love to see them use this now.
They do have to adopt it. Well, they do have 2 years to adopt it, but I actually did attend a presentation. This was about 3 or 4 months ago. The Nova District Traffic Engineer, Gil Chilwicki, talked about a speed limit study that they had done on US 1, I think over in, might be in Alexandria, or it might be a little further south. But they actually set the speed limit quite a bit lower than the 85th percentile speed, just because they did feel like that speed needed to be lower for that particular environment.
That's good to hear.
So I think the district is very supportive of this approach.
And Ray, do you have a short definition or explainer about what the 85th percentile means?
Sure. So what you do when you're doing a speed study is you send somebody out, and they actually, or you can put out electronic equipment, and they will actually collect the speeds for vehicles traveling freely for a couple of hours or so. You plot the speeds of all those vehicles on a graph. It's going to be a normal distribution, so it'll look like that. And then the 85th percentile speed is the speed at which 85% of the vehicles are traveling slower than that. So sort of the history of that is, the speed limit should be, fairly reasonable, as far as you don't want to make it so that everybody is exceeding the speed limit, because then it's pretty meaningless. So the 85th percentile sort of came from that, thinking that most drivers are fairly reasonable, though we know that is often lacking in practice.
And as I understand it, over time, speeds have just gradually gone up, so that 85th percentile speed limit has gradually gotten higher and higher over time. Is that correct? Or
I don't know. You have to look at it on an individual road basis. I don't think speeds change too much. There has been a lot of research underway for the past several years as far as things that can be done to influence drivers to travel more slowly. One of the big things is just restricting the area where the drivers can see. So street trees are very helpful, actually, in terms of getting drivers to travel more slowly. So I don't think we're talking here really about urban, suburban types of areas. If you're talking about freeway facilities, then you might be more right, though certainly some of the top end stuff, Montana no longer has a no speed limit policy, so some of that. But I think for bicycling, we're not really looking too concerned about the freeway situation.
thanks.
Sure. So a couple of things here about bicycle facilities. As you know, green colored pavements and markings, those are designated for bicycle lanes and facilities. There is information in the manual on, if you do have a situation where people are parking in the bike lane, then you can go ahead and put up some signs as far as to try and discourage that. And there's actually a diagram in there talking about angled back-end parking, and says it's common to improve visibility of bicyclists. So I'm not sure if that's new yet, but I would think it is. I know some places have done angled back-end parking to help with the visibility. Also covers buffer separated lanes, and gives several examples of those. I've got a couple here at the bottom. You guys know the county a lot better than I do. So I'm not sure how much mileage we have as far as buffer separated lane in Fairfax County. But certainly that is a much more comfortable, much safer, much better environment for bicycling and it's a lot more likely to get people out there using the facilities. And then separated bicycle lanes, like buffered, but providing even more separation, a little more as far as vertical types of elements to help separate the bicycles from the motorized vehicles. One of the things this does happen here, if the little diagram over there on the right, it does bring in the protected intersection. Probably seen these from the Netherlands, other places. So where you can actually carry the separated bicycle lane through the intersection, closer to the intersection than the crosswalk. So this is something I'm sure is new in this manual.
This is separated bike lanes are what we want to see, and VDOT has been very reluctant, partly because they claim that maintenance is more difficult, which it might be, but if they had the right equipment, it wouldn't be. So I think they're changing gradually, and there is one now in front of the Vienna Metro station that is truly separated, but it's one of the only ones. So hopefully before too long, we'll get more of these.
I think so.
But I will say that that separated lane by the metro station was not cleared of ice and snow. So when VDOT says that, you know, maintenance of it costs more, I suspect so, because to me, at least in my knowledge of it, it was one of the, unless Mother Nature melted all that snow, there was nothing done there to remove snow from those lanes.
Yeah, that's a big problem. They have said that they don't think they have the equipment for that, but they need to buy the equipment if they're going to be putting these in.
I know some jurisdictions do have that equipment now for little plows for lanes, bike lanes and trails and such. But it is a separate thing you got to buy. Counterflow bicycle lanes are covered. I'm not sure we've got a lot of those. They're more in DC, but in the district, but bikeway signs, there is a lot more in terms of that. As far as laying out, standardized signing so that, as you're traveling around, you have a better sense as far as where you are. So once again, like, the cross-county trail, that is a sign which has to be in compliance with the MUTCD, and I'm sure it is. So signalized intersections. So bicyclists, and I'm not sure if this is new or not, but basically as far as doing the analysis, as far as whether a traffic signal is a good idea or not, bicyclists can be considered now as either vehicles or pedestrians. So it gives another option as far as doing that analysis, as far as whether a signal would be an improvement. There is more on the bicycle signal faces, and they do cover what the meanings of the steady and flashing bicycle signals are. And then they've got several pages of examples of different types of bicycle lane transitions as they approach intersections. And these are not just for signalized, but it was a convenient place to put this type of information. So I'd say there's quite a bit more now, including there on the bottom right, where you've got some separated bicycle lane and how to handle that as far as with the right turning traffic. Bike boxes are covered both for turns and also to get in front of the vehicles to be able to get out there quicker. So those are laid out. So once again, the MUTC doesn't require that any of these devices be done, but just having them in the manual is going to help as far as when you are talking to the agency in terms of pointing to an example which can help as far as the discussion. For stop and yield intersections, where a trail or something is crossing a street, the first couple paragraphs actually talk here about in some cases, it might be worthwhile, it might be beneficial to give the priority, the right-of-way to the bicycle traffic rather than the vehicular traffic. And so that's something I think could could happen several places around here. The one at the bottom there, when priority is assigned, the least restrictive control that is appropriate should be placed on the approach. And I know this is something, we just talked about in terms of the proposed state law, but there are a lot of places where stop signs are up and yield signs would be definitely sufficient. The stop signs are just being ignored by me and you and other bicyclists, and particularly where you've got good sight distance, there really just isn't a need. And I'd rather see those stop signs be reserved for places where you actually do need to come to a stop to be able to see the traffic.
Quick comment on the first item as far as giving trail users priority. So folks at Bike Falls Church are trying to get that implemented on the W&OD Trail there, where there's a number of very low volume neighborhood streets that where the trail crosses, and there's more traffic on the trail. So this will certainly help with that argument.
Roundabouts. Bicycle lanes are not allowed in the circulating roadway of roundabouts, there's a lot going on there, so that's just as well. If you haven't ridden a roundabout, single lane roundabouts are fine as far as going through on a bicycle, I think. I think most people are fairly comfortable. The speeds are low. Everyone is yielding to each other, so it does help. For multi-lane and higher speed roundabouts, though, they do talk about separated bike lanes may be beneficial. And then also at the crosswalks of a roundabout, there is more in terms of the actuated types of controls which can be used at the crosswalk to help notify drivers that someone is crossing there. So a little more as far as crosswalks. It does talk about the fact that at mid-block crosswalks, the engineer should be looking at how to make that safer, enhancing driver awareness. You can read the rest of the stuff there. The diagram does have a setback distance for a yield line there over on the right to help lessen the multiple threat problem. And then also talks about the rectangular rapid flashing beacons and pedestrian hybrid beacons can be used at road crossings. I think we've got a lot of RFFBs within the county. That's the first picture there on the left with the crosswalk and then the trail crossing. The pedestrian hybrid beacons, I don't know whether we've got any in Fairfax County, but those are a little more restrictive in terms of if you come up and push the button, there will actually be a red signal come up for the drivers telling them to stop. And then it goes into a flashing red during the clearance type of phase. So then the drivers can proceed through after stopping.
Ray, it sounds like that's a hawk signal.
It was called a hawk, yes.
There is one in Vienna on 123, and there's another one in the county somewhere, but they've been reluctant to use those. I think they work great. They're better than stoplights because motorists, when there's no pedestrian or cyclist, they can proceed through the red light. They work great in Tucson, Arizona, I know.
Yep. And then there's also more as far as aesthetic treatments are allowed in crosswalks. There was actually an editorial in the Washington Post about a week ago or so talking about this as far as in addition to the MUTCD. There is material on railroad and light rail transit crossings, and several examples of that within the MUTCD. So this is certainly not an uncommon thing to happen, and it's not ignored. And then work zones, you might remember as far as those parts of the MUTCD, which were dealing with various contexts, work zones was actually the longest one, temporary traffic control. But it does go in to talk about the fact that if pedestrians and bicyclists are affected, then they need to be considered, things need to be done. And there are several, I think there's 5 different examples in there as far as different figures showing how the the bicycle pedestrians could be, well, I'm sorry, this was just for the bicycles. Pedestrians, there are more examples of that too. And includes so things as far as rerouting a bicycle route around different streets, doing a detour. So, and it does talk about, the third bullet there. If you do have a multi-lane road and perhaps the vehicular traffic is not as large, you could close one or more of the motorized vehicle traffic lanes in order to provide a bicycle facility there in the work zone. So I started out, each state does have to adopt either the federal MUTCD or adopt their own version, and they've got 2 years to do this. I did quickly look at the current Virginia supplement, and it was largely just taking material from the federal manual, but then taking some stuff out based on state law. For example, the federal manual has a sign that's in the roadway saying yield to pedestrians and crosswalk. There is a state law saying you must stop for pedestrians and crosswalk. So the Virginia supplement just eliminates that one sign and says that cannot be used in Virginia. So this is the type of things that Virginia will be looking to do when they're doing their supplement. But there is a lot of new material. And so they're going to be doing a lot as far as reviewing that to figure out what they might need to deal with. After they get through with that, they are going to need to update their design manuals, their standards, because for every project, they've got standard plan sheets that are going to need to be revised. There's going to need to be new training for all of the staff that are dealing with these situations. So it's definitely a big undertaking to incorporate a new manual in terms of the practice. And I do expect there will be public comment during this development process. But Bruce, looks like you have a question.
No, I don't.
Okay. So any questions on that? I do not have any solid information at all as far as what the Virginia process is going to be. But
is this your last slide, Ray? Oh, okay.
So if you do want to take a look at the federal MUTCD, there's the URL for that. So there's a lot of information there you can pull up, and you can just download a PDF of the MUTCD. The easiest way to find the Virginia supplement is just do a search for it. And then there's my contact information. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Ray. Let's open it up to additional questions. And I see there is one. Are states essentially able to supplement their way out of adhering to certain aspects of these guidelines, or are there some limits within which they've got to work?
Generally speaking, a state supplement cannot be less restrictive than the federal. The state manuals have to be substantially compliant, and so the FHWA has to sign off on the state manual. So Virginia cannot take something that's required in the federal MUTCD and make that less restrictive.
All right. Any other questions? Well, Ray, I think you're off the hook. Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. So there is a link here to the MUTCD. You can download it and take a look at it. And Alexis put a link to that article on using street paint to highlight or to reorganize the roadway.
We have
go ahead, Alexis.
Yeah, we have another question in the chat. Before I read it, I just want to invite folks on the call. If you want to raise your hand or go ahead and just come off mute and speak, feel free. David asks, I may have missed it since I stepped away for a minute, but are there any recommendations for crosswalks at on-ramps?
Oh, I feel pretty sure that there are going to be examples in there. I went through the entire manual in terms of for working on this, so I cannot recall everything. But I'm sure there are going to be examples, and certainly there's going to be information. I can look into that and get back.
Yeah, those are deadly sometimes. There's some on-ramps off of Route 7 for 495 that I am reluctant to use because there's such fast traffic. There's two lanes turning onto the on-ramp, and they're going like 45 miles an hour, and you can't see them. We need much better crossings there, and you could signalize them, but VDOT's reluctant to slow anybody down.
Yeah, Bruce, that's the exact location. My mother-in-law got hit. She got hit while crossing that exact spot. She got knocked off her bike. It was, yeah, Route 7 at the on-ramp to I-495 South. It's
Yeah.
I'm just I'll look through the MUTCD too, but yeah, Ray, if you have any citations for me to look at, I need to write VDOT about that.
Well, I hope she's okay.
Yeah, she is luckily, I mean, thank God she was not injured or anything, but it was very scary for us.
Yeah, that's a terrible crossing. I brought it up to VDOT. I tried to meet them out there to show them just how bad it is, and we never made it. But we should probably try that again. You know, there was before there was a trail along there. There was a service worker killed at that intersection, which prompted us many years ago to do a bike light giveaway. That there's so many people in that area. It's a shame that it isn't treated better. I heard someone else making a comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Mary. I noticed on Chain Bridge where the bike trail leaves I-66 and then we have to cross over the express lanes entrance ramps. There is not a bicycle, a way for a cyclist to activate a light there. And there, it's not like I've been in my car, so I don't know if people coming off of I-66 or getting into the express lanes on I-66 are getting any sort of notification that cyclists might be in the area right there.
You know, that's a good question. I wanted to mention that if folks do have situations like that they're concerned about, the county is revising their bicycle master plan. They're combining the bike plan with the trails plan, called the Active Fairfax Plan. We're expecting recommendations any day now. We're going to be asking folks to look for those kind of situations, and if they're not being handled properly, to make suggestions that they be included, because there will be a fairly long comment period. So that's a good point. Same with that
I guess I'm
495.
just
Go ahead.
wondering from Ray's perspective, what kind of signage might be appropriate there?
Oh, I'm not visual. I'm not picturing it. So I would hate to say anything without looking at it. But I know that the express lanes on 66 are fairly recent, and I don't know all the ramps going onto them. I'm trying to think there about Chain Bridge.
Yeah, one thing that we tried to do for the continuation of the trail is get that trail separated. And a lot of places, including 123, it is separated. But if you're coming up onto the roadway there, then you're facing those kind of issues.
Well, when you get off the I-66 parallel trail on Chain Bridge,
Okay.
and it's, let's say, on the north side and you want to head south to cross over I-66, they've done a great job. You know, they keep you off the traffic and they keep you separate. But to get over I-66, the bike trail is not like you get off of it and then you have to cross on Chainbridge Road or in a separated lane from traffic on Chainbridge Road. You have to cross over the entrance and the exit to the those dedicated high speed or high occupancy lanes on I-66. And yeah, there's no signage there at
Mary,
all. And then
when's the last time you were there?
this past weekend.
Okay.
And people are turning left, so they're not even looking at they're not seeing the crosswalk when they're waiting there at the signal. Right.
Correct. Or when they're coming across, they're not even looking for cyclists before the lanes of motorized traffic.
Yeah.
All right, we do have another question. Does the MUTCD encourage the end of right on red at intersections?
I did not look for that. Certainly, there are a lot more agencies that are looking now as far as reducing right turn on red. There are a lot of people who think it was a mistake to get it started. So obviously,
Yeah, we've tried to get VDOT to implement it, and most times they refuse. But yeah, it can be deadly, obviously.
right.
All right. Well, I don't see any more questions. Last call for questions.
I'll ask one more about, is there anything in the manual about leading pedestrian intervals? Is it just something that's kind of encouraged, or is it even mentioned at all?
It would be mentioned. I did not look at that specifically if I started getting into pedestrian stuff, but certainly it is in there. And the traffic signal timing manual, which we developed a few years ago, talks about it. Yeah, LPIs are certainly, they should be encouraged in a lot of places, and a lot of agencies are doing them. But yeah, it is talked about.
All right. Well,
I'll have to look and see what it says about LPIs.
Ray, if you could unshare your screen. Great. All right. Well, thank you again, Ray. We really appreciate it. I am going to share my screen real quick and get off of the Reston Bike Party screen and ask if I'm having a hard time moving my screen because of here we go. Any announcements anyone has to make? Anything upcoming? Any exciting bike news anyone's got? If not, I think I've given you all the information about what we've got coming up. I'll just put a final plug in for these upcoming events, especially the Bike to Work Day. We're going to need volunteers to help us table some of those pit stops. And for the Tyson's ride, we would love to have several bike marshals. So we'll be sending out email. Joey and I will in the newsletter, in her president's message. And as we get closer to the events, we'll put a call out for folks to come help us out. With that, thanks everybody for attending. We're going to end early. I'm sure everyone's going to be upset that we're doing that, but thanks again.
Hey, Bruce, before
Yes.
we leave, just real quick on the Board of Supervisors not advocate or not wanting to support these bills. Did they do that today? I mean, was that in a formal meeting that they agreed not to support these, or is
Yes,
it,
they did. In their legislative committee, they came up with the recommendation, and then at the board meeting on Tuesday, they adopted those recommendations. Okay. We're hoping that they will modify those recommendations on Friday. We think they're open to that. And so we've been working hard all day today, calling supervisors and trying to get their support. So we think that could change.
Okay, I'll try to get a hold of Jimmy.
That would be good if folks could contact their supervisor and put a plug in for those bike bills. And if you need more information, you can send a message to info@fab-bikes.org. Good. All right.
Charlie has a plug for the Vienna community ride that's on May 19th.
All right. Thanks, Charlie. How long is that going to be, Charlie? Is he still here? Yes, he is.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
How long mileage wise?
Yeah.
Is that what you... we usually do them around 5-6 miles.
Okay. Good family ride.
Yeah, that's we never know who we're gonna get. We've had some pretty small kids and we've had some people older than me, so we keep it around 6 miles.
All right, I'll try to put that on our calendar as well.
Okay, thanks.
All right, well, thanks everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks, everybody.